am a geoholic.
That's a steel pan, I think.
Can't help himself. He can't help himself.
Strap in, you got a wild guest. All right, I'll shut the hell up, I promise.
Oh my goodness. Songs that make you go,
What the hell am I listening to? Is what that makes me do.
I wish I knew. Yeah, it's one of those, we ask the guests for their input on the music. And our guest this evening,
And usually they give us some great ideas.
9.5 times.
Gets us in the mood. It's really jiving, jamming. We're just bopping, and I don't know what that was, but it hurt.
And every once in a while, like 1 out of 178 episodes, we have a guest that recommends
so
something
out
like
there
this. We're going to get to all that.
And
we got a lot to get to.
And we have to put that in the Spotify playlist.
We're going to apologize right now for the musical taste of our guests this evening. How's that?
Sounds good.
Good.
Yeah,
all right. Let's get on with this. Here we are, episode 178. Welcome back to Geoholics.
Yes. Already derailing a perfectly set up episode.
Oh my gosh. If people could just have seen, like if we would have had this live 30 minutes ago, the entertainment value would have been off the charts.
Man.
Off the charts. But I do got to mention one thing. The last few days have been amazing. Like we've had record downloads.
Yeah.
The last few days. We set an all-time record 2 days ago. And it's just like, I don't know what's going on. I honestly don't know what's going on. Maybe it's Juneteenth. I don't know what it is. But something.
It was a holiday.
Something has triggered us.
Yeah, and there was a little gap there. We had a nice little over a week long gap of content. So maybe the masses, quote unquote masses, were so in a Geoholics deficit that once it popped up, they just immediately started downloading as much as possible to
Oh my gosh. I hope that was the case. I really do. But I was looking at it for the last 11 days. No, we went 11 days without releasing any content.
Yeah.
And prior to that, we released 5 episodes in 20 days.
Yeah.
So it was overload. It was
Right.
content overload. So either way, the planets have aligned. We had
Really
Juneteenth. Everything is looking up.
It really is.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. So anyways, thanks to all listeners. Thanks to our friends of the program. Thanks to everybody. I mean, our guests, man, oh man, I get humbled a lot by this show, and just kind of watching how things have progressed over the last few days. And then we got this thing from a website that tracks, podcasts and, popularity and stuff like that. And out of 3.1 million podcasts, we're in the top 5%.
Yeah.
It's insane. How does that even happen? I don't know.
That means that there is 180,000 podcasts that might be a little better than ours.
Okay. Fine. Bring me back down to
well, but it doesn't
reality.
say where in that 5%
Yeah.
we are. We could actually,
exactly.
I've seen some other metrics that we might be a little better than we think we are.
All right.
I'll leave it at that.
Either way, thanks everybody. I do want to mention one thing. Dane Corville. I don't know if that name rings a bell. For a number of our listeners, that name probably does ring a bell, but we connected recently, and I had in the past purchased his Fundamentals of Surveying Prep book, his manual, whatever, that he created. Yeah. And unbelievable. I mean, the content is amazing. But he has a website. It's surveyingmanual.myshopify.com. And on this website, he has the book I just mentioned. He's got a Texas Land Surveyor's Prep book. He's even got a children's book on there. In addition, he's got some really cool survey shirts. He's got some pre-made presentations and spreadsheets that you can use to your advantage. Lots and lots of really cool stuff. And he has agreed to give Geoholics listeners a discount.
Oh, really?
So for the next month, I believe this ends on the 20th of July, use simply Geoholic and you will get a 10% discount, which will be applied to all items at checkout.
That is amazing. And that
Pretty
is
cool.
Geoholic singular, correct?
Geoholic singular.
Okay.
And the website, one more time, is surveyingmanual.myshopify.com.
That's amazing.
Super cool of Dane to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it. Really good stuff there. Sean, what's new with you, buddy?
Oh,
Did
man.
you have a good Father's Day?
I did have a good Father's Day.
Good.
I was out last week. Took a
We missed you.
little trip out to the beach with some fathers to celebrate our fatherhood. Had a lot of fun. Thank you to my family for allowing me to do that. And then came back for a nice little Father's Day Sunday. It was
Super cool.
Very lovely. I also saw some lovely pictures of the Grow household celebrating Father's Day, and you in the center of all that. How was your Father's Day?
It was fantastic. Played golf in the morning.
Yeah. How'd you do?
Fine. I did fine.
Good.
I did fine enough.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
I beat Megan. That's all that matters.
Okay.
But my oldest daughter, McKenna, and her fiance, Will, played. And it was Will's. He bought a set of clubs. He's never played golf before. He's been taking lessons.
This was the first time?
His first time on a course.
Oh, that's my nightmare right there. That is right
so
up there with
nervous.
naked in front of a crowd and the test that I forgot to study for. And then it's on the golf course with somebody's first time playing golf.
Speaking of naked in front of a crowd, I have a story for you.
Oh, boy.
Are you ready for it?
I am ready.
So if you remember here, probably about 3 months ago, I told a story about getting a massage
Yes.
from a local masseuse.
That's correct.
And it was an incredible massage.
You mentioned.
And she made it very clear before the massage got started that she was going to massage everything but the kickstand.
Everything but the kickstand. Yes.
And it was such a good massage that I returned this past weekend and got even a better massage. So
where are you going with this here, Kent?
No, I am shouting out Sherry at an Essential Healing Touch in Phoenix. So if you are in Phoenix listening to this, I would highly recommend reaching out to Sherry at an Essential Healing Touch. And if you are visiting Phoenix from out of town, I would highly recommend Sherry at Essential Healing Touch. She has the hands and elbows of an angel.
Of an angel. Is this then? That's the same person that did the furrow. Oh, so you now you're sold. You're going to go back to her every single time.
100%.
Cool. Right.
So, anyways, let's move on with this.
Please.
This is going nowhere.
Yeah.
Tell us about that opening number. Good luck with this.
Okay, so gonna butcher this, guy, so bear with me. That was I guess I'm gonna call them an artist called Aphex Twin, and a song called Bucephalus Bouncing Ball. The Aphex Twin is the stage name of Richard D. James, an influential and highly regarded British electronic musician and composer. He is known for his innovative and pioneering work in the field of electronic music, pushing the boundaries of genre and consistently challenging conventional music norms. I will agree to that. He has been recognized with several awards, including a Grammy for Best Dance Electronic Album in 2015 for Cyro. His music has also featured in films, commercials, and television shows, further expanding his reach and influence. So as much as we want to make fun of this, the guy is a Grammy Award-winning musician,
100%.
so we should probably shut our faces.
100%. And that song is in a movie called Pi. P-I.
Oh, is that the movie about the mathematician guy who you've seen Pi before? It's pretty wild.
Don't ask him yet.
Yeah, I'm not ready to bring
My
in.
mic's
bring
still
in our
on
guest.
mute.
He's on mute.
No,
he's muted.
I should have, but yeah, it's a pretty crazy movie.
Really? You've seen it?
Yeah. It's about this
Okay, I gotta see it.
mathematician, and he does all these things with sequencing, and I think
Stock market.
he thinks he figures out how to predict analytics from the stock market, like well before there was algorithms and all these things. So
Before AI.
yeah, exactly. So pretty wild stuff.
Cool. I'm going to have to check it out. We got a lot to get to. We are,
do.
of course, in the Get Kids Into Survey studio this evening.
We are.
And little did most people know that there is a West Coast Get Kids Into Survey. And that is Trent Keenan, of course. And I got to mention, TK had a birthday last week. So shout out to TK. Happy belated birthday. But the West Coast Get Kids Into Survey is a franchise, is my understanding, of Get Kids Into Survey. There are other franchises available. So if you're interested, reach out to Elaine Ball at Get Kids Into Survey if you'd like to find out more about the franchise opportunities. So moving right along, are you ready for the Airworks somewhat random trivia?
I am. A good new friend of mine suggested that I talk about some trivia nuggets about the James Webb Space Telescope.
Interesting.
You're not talking about me, are you?
I am not. So couple things that I didn't know, and I'm sure you guys know about this. You see it in the news. You see these crazy pictures of this telescope that they launched, similar to, it's basically the phase 2 of the Hubble telescope kind of program. But the James Webb telescope is actually lighter than the Hubble telescope, even though it's about 3 times the size. And the mirrors are the largest large telescope mirrors of all time. And what it looks like is gold. I don't know if you've seen the pictures, but it looks like it's gold. That's actually beryllium. And there's only about a little under less than 2 ounces of gold on the telescope.
Interesting.
And not only that, guess how cold they can get this, it can operate. Guess what temperature it can operate in?
Negative 260 Kelvin.
Why is this even important?
Kelvin is only positive. You can't go.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Then.
Yeah. So what's your guess?
15 Kelvin.
It can actually get down to
negative 260 centigrade.
Yeah, it can get down to 7 Kelvin.
Oh, I was off by about 8.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty close though. I mean, that is
a lot in infrared.
That is crazy. I mean, that's as cold as when when we think that you want to preserve yourself forever and you're going to get in the cryo tank, like you're going to be that cold. And this thing can go it can just go forever. It's actually only meant to go 5 to 10 years, and I think we're 2 years in now.
Holy crap!
So it's going to keep going and keep looking at stuff and stare into an empty spot, what looks like an empty spot of space, and produce these crazy images that are just absolutely baffling. But
it orbits at a Lagrange point.
Sean,
like gravity will.
Once again, you have blown my mind.
That is always my goal in the somewhat random trivia moment.
The fact of the matter is, you came up with this 30 seconds before we started recording.
Correct.
So
just a little glimpse into the magic that can be performed.
Kudos to you. All right. Next up, we have the Advanced Geodetic Survey's Weekly Words of Wisdom. We might need to start calling this something else because it's always a quote. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily a words of wisdom.
Well, a quote is some words of wisdom.
I suppose.
So,
this is another good one. I'm going to have to really focus on this and read this because our guest this evening will probably be able to make sense of this quote, whereas I can't. So here we go. Mathematics is an infinity of flexibles forcing pure thought into a cosmos. It is an arc of austerity cutting realms of reason with geodesic grandeur. So I have no idea what that means.
I got about 50% of those words know what they mean.
But the quote was by
overestimated my abilities.
Cletus O. Oakley.
Cletus Oakley.
Cletus Oakley.
I know him very well.
Are you serious?
No.
Oh, I was going to be like, I am really impressed.
No.
The Cars movie by Pixar.
But that might be the smartest sentence that anyone named Cletus has ever put together.
You're a stereotype.
That's
horrible.
So.
You are going to hell.
But on average.
Hey, I'm from North Carolina. I'm allowed to.
You sure can. That's true. That's true. You get a pass. So I had to look up geodesic to get an understanding of what that word meant, to be honest with you. So geodesic means denoting the shortest possible line between 2 points on a sphere or other curved surface. Also another term for geodetic.
Oh, really?
That ties it all together.
That really does tie it together.
Indeed. It does indeed. Before we get to our guests this evening, here's this week's Bad Elf Minute.
Hello, Geoholics, and welcome to Bad Elf's Point of Beginning, a segment specially crafted for the consumption of geospatial news, history, and technology. We hope you enjoy the content and perhaps even learn something. My name is Dr. Nick Smolovsky. I'm a Geoholic, and I'm here to be your geospatial guide. Sorry to be a broken record about artificial intelligence recently. However, important news is coming out about regulations across the pond. The European Union is one of the first major jurisdictions in the world to introduce comprehensive laws governing artificial intelligence, aka AI. The AI Act, which is still under negotiation, would classify AI systems according to their risk level and, most importantly, impose different requirements on providers and users of AI systems depending on the level of risk. For example, AI systems that are of unacceptable risk, quote-unquote, would be prohibited, while AI systems that are of high risk would be subject to stricter regulations, such as a mandatory impact assessment or compliance with data protection rules. The AI Act also includes several provisions designed to promote the development of trustworthy AI, such as requirements for transparency, explainability, and fairness. In addition, the AI Act would establish a new European Artificial Intelligence Board to oversee the implementation and enforce the laws. The AI Act is a significant piece of legislation that could have major impact on the development and the use of AI in the European Union. It remains to be seen whether the final version of the law will be adopted in its current form, but it's clear that the EU is committing to ensuring that AI is developed and used in a safe and ethical manner. This AI Act is expected to be adopted in later 2023. If you have any questions or comments about today's POB segment, please reach out to me via LinkedIn or through the Geoholics channels. And that does it for us at B2 Studios in sunny Texas. Live long and prosper, my friends.
So let's get our guest in here this evening. Our guest is Brian Fisher. A little bit about Brian. He was episode 26. So he's an OG, original guest.
Anyone in the secret room at the bar was an OG.
100%. So a little bit about Brian, in case you've forgotten. He was born in Phoenix. He attended Phoenix College. He said when he graduated, he had a white rope. I'm not sure what that means, but I'm sure it means he's
something for GPA.
He's really smart. He's really smart. His current job is he's a professional land surveyor at Central Arizona Project, also known as CAP here in the Valley.
No one calls it CAP.
A little bit about, they don't?
CAP.
Okay, Sam. Sorry,
like
CAP.
FIG.
A little bit about Brian here. He's involved in everything. At Arizona Professional Land Surveyors Association, he's currently the director and secretary. I'm not going to read all this because it gets to be a little bit ridiculous. He's a chairman of the State Geospatial Committee, president of the Central Chapter in 2023. He is also the secretary of the Education Foundation since 2003. He's been doing it forever.
Like that, yeah.
At AGIC, he is the work group co-chair. At AAGS, he's a director, membership committee member. NSPS, he is, what do you do here,
Nothing.
Brian?
I don't do anything on NSPS.
Okay, nix that. American Surveyor Magazine, he's a periodic contributor to American Surveyor Magazine. At NGS, he is the Arizona State Geodetic Coordinator. And as I mentioned, his day job, professional land surveyor at CAP.
Oh, you missed one more important thing.
I got maybe, there's
AAGS.
two. What do you got?
A repeat contributor to the Geoholics.
A repeat.
There you go.
And I am shocked.
Not on the blacklist.
Yet.
Not.
I'm
yet.
shocked that this is not on his resume here. I believe, if I remember correctly, you were the inaugural and only recipient of the United Surveyors of Arizona
I was.
Lifetime Achievement Award.
There you go. I still have that on my desk.
It's
The
probably,
beautiful globe.
it's probably one of the coolest awards you've ever received.
It is.
Did you set the bar so high that they still have not found another person to receive that award?
Actually,
probably
the,
something cheeky
the
I could say
organization
about
folded.
Because of that award.
Because of that award?
That's how bad it was.
All
That's
the
how
money.
they were. They're like, you guys are going to stoop that low. It's over.
All of our money went into that award, and that was it. We were done after that.
Worth at least
That's great.
$50.
So, anyways, Trimble Pearl Point icebreaker time. Brian, would you rather travel back in time to meet your ancestors or travel to the future to meet your descendants?
Oh, great question.
Well, I suppose if you got near light speed, you could do the second one. The first one, to our understanding of physics, is not possible.
Okay, well, let's just take all that out of it and assume these things are possible, as hard as that may be. Which would you rather do?
Throw Einsteinian physics out the window?
Don't overthink it.
Sure, why not?
Don't overthink
exactly.
it.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of cheeky political things you could spin that into. It's
Which one would you do?
I'm just going to go with
Would you go backwards or forwards?
I could go way back.
Go back.
Way back.
Interesting. Sean, what would you do?
I think I would also go back merely because I will less likely to be disappointed going backwards than if I went forwards. I could get into the line may die out.
You guys
and
are
it may
still
not
playing
even
Xbox?
exist.
What the hell's wrong with you?
Or my lineage turns into a bunch of terrible, horrible people, and I'm assuming that my descendants or ancestors weren't terrible, horrible people.
They did a good job.
Good enough to get
They
me
just had
here.
better diets.
Yeah.
So I would like to go back.
And, I'm in agreement with both of you guys. So we're 3 for 3. I would go back as well.
just so you can meet a Grosakowski?
Grokowalskis.
Groskowalski.
Yeah, Grokowalskis.
Got
Like
it.
to get that story. It's only been handed down to me, so who knows what the truth is.
Right.
Let's get to know Brian here just a little bit. Brian, how did you get introduced to geodesy?
That's an interesting one. It's probably because I studied math in high school. I did a lot of math in high school. I was in calculus in high school.
Were ya?
Can you believe that? Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
I did extra like summer school and that kind of thing in math.
So you've always had a affinity for math.
There's probably reasons I was in summer school, and they're not all good. But no, I mean, it's, I guess it's something I was able to do. I'm not going to say I was good at it, but I was able to do it.
Well, you had to be pretty good at it.
Maybe there's a little bit of,
It came to you naturally.
wow, it came to me through instruction and a lot of hard work. What are you kidding? Natural.
Well, the same amount of instruction and hard work doesn't necessarily sink into everyone like it did you.
Maybe.
Fair enough.
Sure, I don't know. Maybe.
All right.
Did this giant beer belly come naturally? I guess so.
I'm assuming you. I guess I'm assuming you had that in high school, and if so,
beer belly?
that'd be,
No, I was
that
quite
would be
fit.
very, very impressive.
I did have a mustache though, somewhat of a goatee.
Yeah. Did you have a
Late
beard in
bloomer.
high school?
God, no.
Yeah, I had a patchy beard in high
Did
school.
you really?
Oh yeah.
Oh, God, no.
Oh, I mean, it was spotty at best, but I was rocking that.
It was horrible for me.
Like
As far as, like,
my
facial hair
sophomore
goes.
year, I was like getting the facial hair going.
Yeah.
I was never like, even to this day, I'm not a hairy individual. It's like, it's one of those things. I just don't have a lot of body hair.
Well, it's like now you guys are podcasting, so it's like if I turn this way, you can see the clear bald spot. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, I've been pretty lucky there too as well. So I'm only going to ask you about CAP one time. Okay.
Good, because I didn't clear any of this with them. So.
In that case, tell us what you love about your job.
Work-life balance.
Good stuff.
That is absolutely,
Nice.
unequivocally, that's right there.
What do they do better to encourage that balance than other
Paid
entities?
time off.
Paid time off.
Yeah, and it just, a lot of the stuff that we're working on it's maintenance oriented, which is planned. It's monitoring oriented, which is absolutely planned. I mean, some of these things take decades. You're going to start monitoring subsidence or that kind of thing. I mean, it's like, you don't do that overnight. You do that over years on years on years. So our work is well planned. Of course, I got to be in bright and early tomorrow because I'm working on some of that, but yeah. No, it's not, you're not, I spent a fair amount of time being in private sector, and you chase the money in more ways than one. You chase it to get the contract. You chase it to get paid for it. You chase it so you don't have to pay all those accusations that they seem to always tend to come up with. And
Sure.
so that if you're a private sector, you got to work when you got to work.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of balance.
So based on that response, I'm assuming you prefer the public sector versus the private sector.
Oh, big time. Yeah. I mean, it's much more monotone, as it were. And so then you can focus on things that I think are important. Like, I'm not going to do a spoiler, but you're going to say, or any parting words. And so you'll make sense when I get to that one. Because I have a parting word on that one. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget.
There you go.
It goes back to that. There's your tie-in. That's, what's good writing. You do the tie-in. You get the thing up front, and then later you tie it back in.
So do you still feel that working in the public sector, you're able to provide as much value as you could in the private sector?
How do you define value?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Maybe it's even more. Maybe you can provide more value in the public sector.
But
because there's budgets, like in the private sector, in order to take things to the next level, it costs more money, and you got budgets to worry about and this and that. Whereas in the public sector,
I got a budget in public.
You have a of
course,
a budget.
Public. Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the major things I was working on this week is like budgeting things. I did a 25-year look ahead on equipment life cycles. I mean, which is like a little absurd when you
that
think
sounds crazy given our industry here of equipment life cycle that is obsolete in 6 months.
Yeah.
Well, no, and that gets into it. I mean, it was like, and that was kind of the thing. It was like they were like, "Hey, can you do a steady state budget?" And so I'm trying to think how many pieces of equipment we have. Dozens. So we have 2 core stations. We've got 5 roving receivers. We've got 8 static receivers. We have a level. We have 2 total stations. We have 2 different survey trucks. There's 3 registered professionals that are on staff. I mean, it's like, and there's a lot of gear.
Sure.
And they're constantly like, hey, are you going to, put this RKK module on this aerial drone? And, you've got data collectors, you've got software, you've got all these things. And, one of the questions they were asking is, can you have a steady state budget year on year? And, basically saying, I have a unit of money and I'll have the same unit of money every single year. And I tried to do that. And I tried to look at life cycles, which are reasonableistic guesses of what you're going to have in the future. And I played and played and played with it, and I couldn't make it work. And finally, I just went back and reapproached the problem completely and found out that I have to have 1.5 units per year on average. Some years it's 0, some years it's 3. There's some, and then I wrote a memo and sent that back up the chain, and they're still reviewing it, whether they buy into what I have to say or not. I mean, that remains to be seen, but it's, cool. If we don't get that budget, then we may not be able to have the same level of performance. I mean, to a great extent, you've got the same complexity you have in the private sector. It might just be a little bit more focused. Private sector, you're like, did I win the contract?
Sure.
And then if you start not winning contracts, eventually you get laid off. But, in the public sector, you're like, well, I still have to justify things. I have a board, I have management I answer to. I have a board that the management answers to. Sometimes you have to go to that level.
Sure.
So, I absolutely do budgets. I do them all the time.
Cool. Awesome.
But going back to value, I think it's a valid point. And I'll put it back on you, Kent. Like, how do you, I know you're not the guest tonight, but you asked the question, how do you define value and adding value? And is that different in the private sector versus the public sector?
Well, since I've never worked in the public sector,
I always knew you didn't work. No, I'm sorry.
Since I've never worked
in podcast isn't a job
sector, it's hard for me to understand, what that environment is like.
Well, I'm not asking about the environment. In how would you define adding value in the public sector?
Well,
what would a person
impression of the public sector is that, and I think Brian just diffused what I was going to say, but my impression is that you have an endless budget, basically, to take things to the nth degree that you typically may not in the private sector because you don't have the budget to do it. Whereas in the public sector, you have the budget to be able to, occupy these points for 6 times versus 2 times in the private sector or whatever. You know what I mean? To just kind of take it another level.
Well, I think what Brian has just said is that's not true.
NOS 58 technically is 2. Just to say.
Yeah.
That's the minimum. I'm sorry, I'm getting nerd.
I think that what he was trying to say is the same constraints still exist.
Sure.
He does not have an infinite budget. He does have to show what value buying equipment and whatever he's going to do is going to add to the project. And in his case, sometimes the project may be the largest project in the state or some 50-year thing that is beyond the comprehension of private guys like us that work in month and 6-month intervals.
Yeah. And I also, to take it one step further, again, my impression is that on the public side, the pace at which work is completed is a little bit slower than what it is on the private side, again, because of
that depends
budget constraints.
I don't think he likes you calling him lazy.
You started this, Sean.
No, it's not lazy.
It's thorough.
Lack of coming in early. I'm salary, so I can kind of like go hog wild when I want to.
Mm-hmm.
Because actually I got in trouble for that a number of years ago. I probably shouldn't talk about that too much, but I was not salary, so I'm not allowed to direct my own hours, and at some era in the past, and now I am salary, so it's like if I'm out on a job and it's going to take 2 more hours and I don't want to drive back down here the next day, I just punch it out.
Sure,
we do that a lot.
Yeah,
it depends on the job. It totally depends on the job, but it's like.
Talk about that a little bit. What is as best as you can, what does a typical job look like?
Well, there is no typical job, but we do a little bit of everything. It's like the canal itself that I work for, my day job, as it were, just south of 400 miles. When you get all the little tendrils that stick off of it, there's a number they quote on the website. It's like 376 or 320 something, because there's a mile marker, but then we double down on mile markers now and again. Anyway, roughly 1,000 miles of boundary because you got two sides.
Yep.
And they're all over the place. So there's that. There's lots of encroachments. There's 3 land agents in my own group that deal with nothing but land-related things. A lot of them are licenses. There's a lot of utilities that cross us. There's various water withdrawal. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, there's actually an amazing amount of stuff that comes out of that canal, and interactions and complexity. But so just from a boundary standpoint, you have a huge amount of boundary to manage. Now, there's like, you get into some of the subtleties of like, you cannot adversely possess against the federal government, and we are stewards for the federal government. So just because you've been encroaching for 25 years doesn't mean we won't kick you off, as it were, because you're not allowed to do that. But I've seen all sorts of political exceptions to that. I'm not necessarily going to get into those, but there's major home developers that come in and something happens. Like there's one where they had a retaining wall, and then the retaining wall failed, and they had to come in and do some extra work. And I'm sure there was a congressman involved, as it were, that came in and, they're getting, dispensation for having to encroach and us, remediating land. There is a process. I mean, that's kind of like way above my pay grade. I just tell them where. I don't tell them why. I don't tell them when. I don't tell them how. Surveying is where. But so that's one. I mean, just all this cadastral component that goes on. There's a huge amount of boundary just to manage. Then there's a huge amount of maintenance to manage. That thing is a machine that is running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is the single biggest PowerPoint user in the state of Arizona, seconded by things like smelters at mines. We use a lot of power to pump water thousands of feet up.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. It's not a gravity system. It's got a lot of pumps. Starting with it's south of 900 feet off of Lake Havasu, but that's the biggest lift. But then all the other lifts are in the hundreds of feet. It's a lot of power to pump that
I didn't
water.
know that it was the biggest user of power.
I've heard that statistic. I have to research that one to give you exact numbers. This is a casual conversation. So we're not
The fact checkers will not be coming to our door after.
no, you guys are second to this one mine.
Right.
Like at a, I don't know, copper doesn't take as much as aluminum, but that's 5 C's in Arizona. One of them's copper.
One of them's copper.
Yeah.
So so there's that component, the maintenance component. There's a geophysical component to it, I guess I'd call it, with you pump water out of the ground. That is fluids withdrawal. That causes the strata that you have just altered to do things, which we'll call vertical motion. A lot of people like calling it land subsidence. So I do a fair amount, or we as a department do a fair amount of stuff with land subsidence. That's a huge thing. We have structural deformation that we do on a couple of our major structures, the dam being one of them that we monitor. That's a periodic thing.
So I wanted to ask real quick, just because I'm a dirt nerd, as far as the land subsidence, and is it mostly in the areas where you're pumping groundwater, or is it to monitor parts of the system for movement in what, if part of the canal is experiencing subsidence, then you could get some structural distress, I guess is the right word. Or are you looking more of what impact you're having on the groundwater you're pumping?
Both. Well, anywhere you do any kind of fluid withdrawal, it could be oil, it could be natural gas, that could be water. I'm trying to think what other fluids they commonly take out. I think that's about it. Those are the big ones. Texas has this in their oil fields. Louisiana has a lot of subsidence, but that's mostly Louisiana's a whole nother animal. But they do have a lot of subsidence out there. You go back, there's some interesting big reports, like the storm surge that happened with Katrina back in the day, if you guys remember that. And a lot of levees failed. Well, they failed not because they couldn't build them right. They failed. One of the principal root causes was they had a lot of subsidence, and they were building to a height that was to a mark that was no longer valid. That's one way to put it. And
so they thought it was here, and it actually was here. Yeah.
Yeah. And those of you who can't see the video, he's moving his hand down or towards the center of mass of the planet. It had lost geometric height. And so therefore, this 100-year event that you're designing for is no longer a 100-year event. It's a 50-year event or something slightly different, or something less. And then you have a true 100-year event, which was Katrina, and it comes in, it just rolls right over the top of all these levees, and you get massive flooding and property damage, et cetera. It's bad. That's the short answer is it's bad. So that also has a factor that can go on here, because if you have vertical motion, you do not have the same topography that you had previously, and your flood control may not work correctly. Your sewers may not work correctly because they're no longer operating at the same slope.
Or connected.
Or connected. They might be reversing flow. I mean, that's entirely possible. I mean, it's a complex issue. You can get into the longevity of infrastructures and, the life of a pipe, could be 50 years or somewhere in that neighborhood. And it's like, but some of the magnitudes that we have commonly, I'm trying to think, you should get Brian Conway on here from ADWR. He's got some neat stuff on that too. Some of the areas it's measured in the tens of feet in Arizona.
Yeah.
Depending on the epoch, depending on your start and stop time. But Dysart Drain is one that comes to mind. I think it's about at the 50-foot magnitude for those U.S. audience people that work in feet. But
and that means the ground was 50 feet higher at one point than it is now.
Yep, that's exactly
the one that
took that much water.
One we've seen recently was somewhere between 5 and 10 centimeters a year.
5 and 10 centimeters. Okay.
Yeah, one's about the minimum threshold to be able to detect in an annual sense. Depending on how you measure it, that's like satellite-based INSAR. That can measure down into that 1-ish centimeter. Obviously, ground survey, depending on how you do it, can be at that level. Sub 5 millimeters, hard to detect, hard to see that signal in short eras, but in longer eras, it accumulates. 10 years, that's 5 centimeters. We can totally measure that.
For sure.
That's
crazy.
But lots of stuff going on with the project. There's probably more I could list, but those are the highlights. But
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right, let's move on here. I've titled this next segment Geodesy for Dummies. Okay. Because
that works for me.
I think there's a lot of folks out there, surveyors specifically, that don't have a firm grasp on this. And before we move on to that, I want to read the definition of geodesy that I came up with today. It's pretty complicated, but the idea of the conversation moving forward is to try to simplify it. Okay. So the definition I came up with, I didn't invent this definition. I came up by doing some research today. Geodesy is a scientific discipline that involves the measurement and study of the Earth's shape, size, gravitational field, and orientation in space. Geodesy aims to accurately determine the positions and elevations of points on the Earth's surface, as well as the shape and size of the Earth itself. Brian?
Yeah, that sounds like what NGS, National Geodetic Survey, has. So
sounds about right.
Size and shape of the Earth and its gravity fields and orientation. And you can unpack all of those. I mean, it's like size and shape, that one's pretty easy. How big is it? What shape is it? Hey, spoiler, it's round. But it's not exactly spherical.
Yeah, I've heard that. It's not. And does it?
Oh, it is round.
I know it's very, very, very round. I've heard that little
ish.
I've heard that tidbit that it's actually very smooth,
not flat
compared to
no.
Well, this is it's the pool ball comparison. Like if you take if you think about of how smooth it is, and it's smoother than a cue ball, even when you consider the tallest peak and the lowest depths of the ocean.
Yeah,
still technically smoother.
Yep.
But it's not round, right?
It's pretty damn spherical. You want to, depending on what parlance you want to talk in. Yeah, it has a little bit of oblateness to it. The equator pooks out, and the poles are kind of squished down. Like picture if the equator were, I don't know, if the poles were up and down, and it was a beach ball, and you kind of pressed on it a little bit, then that's the shape you got. You're flat on the top,
bulges a little.
Yeah, kind of like me. I bulge in the middle.
So where does gravity come into play then when you were measuring the Earth?
Okay, so what does water do? When you spill it on the table, where's it go?
Towards the center.
Let's do another one. Which I know this is you've got the explicit lyrics, so I'm trying to be PG rated because I don't want to have
That's your choice.
That's okay. Yeah.
Which way does shit flow? I'll ask you that one. Downhill. That's the answer. So it's like, okay, so the whole notion of gravity is you're going to fluids are going to seek equilibrium, meaning that they have the same. If something is higher than something else uphill, it'll want to go downhill. It'll want to go downhill until it flattens out into an equipotentially equal surface. Think the ocean. So the whole ocean is the bottom. And like, if you go back far enough, you can get into, Gauss, mathematician, I think he's in the 1500s. So you have this notion that there's this Gaussian surface that's out there. It's the sea level. The sea level is the same all over the whole planet, just in round terms. And what he's really referring to is that it has the same gravity potential everywhere. Meaning
at that surface.
Well, and then you can get into a little, like this is like what Newton's second law is like. I can't remember his laws off the top of my head, but anyway, it's like everything has gravity. I have gravity, so the Earth is pulling down on me, and I'm pulling up on the Earth a very, very small amount.
Yeah, I think that's first.
Is that the first law?
Second's momentum.
Oh, the conservation,
Yeah.
Like object motion tends to stay in motion until it's acted upon by an equal and opposite force.
Yeah, that.
Yeah, that one. So I don't remember. It's like I'm a surveyor. Come on.
Let me ask you this. Is gravity the same here as it is on the opposite side of the Earth?
No, because the opposite side of the Earth unequivocally is going to be at a different height. Actually, I think that's out in the ocean. So the opposite of where we are, pointing on that map over there, for those of you on the webcam, is out in the Indian Ocean somewhere. So the opposite side from where we are, the antipode, as it were. That's a nice fancy term for you.
Antipode.
Antipode. Just means the opposite point. It's going to be in the Indian Ocean. It's like your closest landfall, I don't know, I'd have to guess, Kerguelen Island, down there in the South Indian Ocean. So since it's out in the ocean, it's going to be lower than we are. Where are we at right here? I'm going to guess 1,400 feet.
Yeah, somewhere about that. But if we were at sea level, would we have the same? We would have the same gravitational force here versus in the Indian Ocean, right?
Well, no. Okay, this whole notion of sea level being the same everywhere, so the sea level principally is going to have the same gravity potential. I'm trying to think of an easy way to say this one. The further away you get from the center of mass of an object, the gravity field does dissipate. It goes down. Inverse square, that whole thing. It starts to dissipate. So it's like if you're out in orbit, you have less gravity than you have here, less instantaneous gravity. The gravity field is dissipating. It's becoming weaker. So to Sean's point, if we're at sea level at this location, this latitude and longitude, and then you go to sea level of the other location, yeah, they'll be equal, but we're not. We're up on the surface. So the surface has less gravity than does sea level. Sea level has a larger number, a larger geopotential number than does where we are. The geopotential numbers go down as you raise in elevation. They also can go down depending on mass distribution. And this is getting into some pretty heavy concepts of physical geodesy is what we're talking about here. I might want to do a segue real fast. I am not a geodesist. I just want to say that right here and now.
But you play one on podcast?
No, I don't. I don't play one on podcast. Go back to one of my titles. I'm on the AAGS, the American Association for Geodetic Surveys. Now, there's some people on that board that are wicked educated and really smart and brilliant, super cool people. I am not one of those people. I am just this guy, I'm a dirt surveyor. That's what I like to say. I like doing geodetic work because, and this is a concept that's going around in my mind, is like all surveys kind of, in my opinion, are geodetic surveys. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to apply the corrections. I don't think is the right word, but I mean, it's like, if it's a small enough job, I don't necessarily have to concern myself with the error that's going to inevitably accumulate from not applying corrections. Like the room we're sitting in, it is a cube. One side to the other, I can't measure the difference between deflection to vertical. I cannot measure the difference in gravity within this room on the floor, assuming the floor is relatively level. It's not going to be a detectable quantity. So that wall over there behind you, Kent, and the wall behind me, which I'm on the opposite side of this little table for those of you who cannot see where we're sitting, the podcast, or what have you, not podcast, what do you call that? The stream? They can see it.
Yeah.
This wall I'm pointing and that wall over there. Those are parallel. They're parallel lines. And what we're getting into is a basic fundamental of geometry. And what kind of geometry, Kent? You know this one. Starts with an E. There's a dude, ancient Egypt. It's up in Greece at the time when he wrote stuff down.
I have no idea.
Yeah, you do. Euclid. There you go. See, Sean knows this. So Euclidean geometry.
Sean's an engineer. He's smart.
What's the fifth postulate of Euclid? There's one. I don't know the first four. You'd be like, oh, you're so smart. You know the fifth one. I just know the fifth one doesn't work because parallel lines never intersect. That's the fifth postulate of Euclidean geometry. I forget what the first four is. I think the first one's like a point defines a thing in space. 2 points are a line. He keeps building from there. Eventually you get up to the parallel lines do not intersect. That's wrong. Okay, I don't like saying things are right and wrong, but that one's wrong. Parallel lines do intersect eventually. You cannot prove it. You cannot prove that postulate, that fundamental of cubic geometry. And what have you just invented? It was a guy named Riemann, if I'm saying his name correctly. Riemannian geometry, spherical geometry. I'll give you an example. I'm standing in the North Pole. My feet are cold. It's ice. And I'm looking south to London, specifically Greenwich. So I'm going right through Greenwich, and then I'm going to head down to the equator on this line of longitude, the zero line, the prime meridian line of longitude. And once I get there, I'm really close to Ghana, is where I'm really close to. Now I'm going to turn 90 degrees, and I'm going to face west, and I'm going to point over to South America. I'm going to point over to Ecuador. Okay, and that's, I can't remember Ecuador's longitude off the top of my head, but let's say it's 90 degrees west longitude. And then when I get to Ecuador, I'm going to turn 90 degrees, and I'm going to go back to the North Pole. Well, what angle have I just inscribed at the North Pole? 90 degrees, right? So 90 plus 90 plus 90. This is a Riemannian triangle that I've just described, and it's 270 degrees within said triangle. What's that formula that we all know and love about Euclidean geometry and the sum of the interior angles of any closed polygon? The general form. N minus 2 times 180, right? This is a three-sided object. Number of sides is 3. Minus 2. It's 1 times 180. What's 180 times 1, Kent?
That would be 180, Brian.
180. Okay, so how in the hell did we just get a 270-degree triangle? It's not Euclidean space. It's Riemannian space. And then then you can get into like a nice classic geodetic thing of spherical axis.
But are we talking about declination?
No, we're just talking about a triangle. I just described a triangle on the surface of the Earth that has 270 degrees of interior angle. Mm-hmm. It's spherical axis at its finest. Now, you can't observe it because all these points are too far apart.
It's not flat.
It's not flat. It's on a sphere. And down, is not down the same direction. It's like as I start walking around the Earth, down is a different angle. And this gets into, leveling and, you can get into correctors for curvature of the Earth, and the actual rods I have on either side of differential leveling are actually tipping away each other, type of thing, depending, on the gravity field they're actually in and the curvature, et cetera. So hopefully that wasn't confusing, and hopefully it was it made some sense, but it's like there's different geometry out there. So coming back to when are surveys plane surveys, Euclidean geometric surveys, and when are they not plane surveys? When are they geodetic surveys? It just depends on what you can measure and what applies. Yeah. You get some huge, giant example of North Pole to Ghana to Ecuador and back to the North Pole, then obviously it's really easy to visualize that one as being a triangle that's kind of weird. But what about if it's just like a couple, 3 mountain peaks that are only separated by 50 miles? Well, that spherical excess could be measured only in a few seconds at that point. It's, a few seconds of interior angle or minutes of interior angle. I never did that kind of work, so I don't know those numbers off the top of my head. But, it's like that was old triangulation stuff. They definitely had spherical excess in the triangulation era of geodetic survey work. But we have that today in the tools that we have. It's like GPS is inherently a geodetic tool. It's operating in that, for lack of a better term, reference ellipsoid environment, which is that round Earth thing. And then you're going to try to do something with that. It might be kind of sort of Euclidean in the background. Those of you who look deep enough in your data collectors and see it's Earth-centered, Earth-fixed Cartesian coordinates, that whole ECF thing. Yeah, that is Euclidean in the background. But that is geometric geodesy, not physical geodesy. You still have to measure those two together. I don't know if I'm really explaining this It's just really beautiful math. I mean, the math is very beautiful in the background. It's very straightforward, and once you get into some of these really basic fundamentals, it's not that hard to apply. And that's a good segue into something that we're working on in AAGS, which is a certificate in geodetic surveying. It's what are these fundamentals that a surveyor needs to know? A geodetic surveyor needs to know. A surveyor that you're going to hire to do a job for you. Like think, I'm going to have, me as a hiring agency, I want to have a pre-qual set of parameters to hire somebody to come out and do photo control across our whole canal. It's really long. It's 300 miles long. And I want somebody that kind of knows what they're doing with geodesy. What questions would I ask them? Ken, I'm going to hire David Evans and Associates, or I'm going to consider David Evans and Associates. This is a hypothetical. I'm not
purely hypothetical.
Violating contracting rules and procurement, etc. Just a hypothetical. So, but I mean, what would I ask David Evans, your employer? What would I ask of you as a statement of qualification? What could I do? It could get complex. However, if I said, I want to ensure that you have somebody that has a CGS, and I'm kind of using that term loosely because it's not necessarily official yet, but they have a certificate in geodetic surveying. I, as a contracting entity, can state that as a requirement for you as a bidding group, and you could have a CGS on staff that would be on my project, and then I, the contracting agency, can have a surety that you won't completely screw it up. At least we've reached some sort of benchmark. And that's something we're working on right now. That's exciting.
This is the first I've heard of that.
They've been working on it for 12 years.
12 years?
Maybe 15.
So is it ever going to be a thing?
Yeah, I'm on the board and I'm pushing for it. And there's, other people.
I think it's a great
board.
idea. Yeah.
I do too. I really, really, really want to see it happen.
Well,
We've got 60 of, 200 questions already prepared.
I'm just curious, what does we talk about it a lot, but what's a registered land surveyor? Where are the gaps between what that guy knows and a licensed certified geodetic surveyor?
Or CGS. It's not a certificate.
Well, let's say it's whatever it is. Say the person that person that is qualified to receive that license.
So here's what a CGS will
What are the gaps between that person and Kent?
Here's what we're trying. Yeah, Kent's a good guy. I like him. Let's pick somebody else. Can we do that? Can we call somebody else, or is that liable? That might be liable.
No, you got to pick on Kent.
Let's just say the average surveyor.
Okay, the average licensed surveyor,
which is slightly below Kent.
Which is
okay. No,
close to Kent.
All jesting aside, come on, we're not being serious. This is sarcasm. Okay, so
what does your average surveyor not know that
here's some of the stuff that you would.
I think that gap is big.
Well, it probably is.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people realize that.
There's like that periodic contributor title that I wrote for you. It's like, I wish I had the time and the energy to write all the time. I love writing. Writing, to quote Stephen King, is the way to psychically connect with so many others, because it's like I'm writing something down in some distant future. You're going to read it and we will have this connection. There was another neat thing I heard about writing too. It was like writing is this process that intelligent people do to refine their thoughts and come to a nice result and to have an improvement. You asked me about value earlier. What value do we have? We could go down that, but writing adds value, I think. Reading adds value. Having conversations, this podcast is value, I think, for our industry, because we're talking about things. We're hashing things out. We're improving ourselves. We're refining what we do. This is the refining fire that sharpens us as an industry, this type of activity, and I love it. And I'm losing my point because I drank too much. But
it goes back to, I want to know.
Yeah.
What does Kent not know?
Okay, that's a good. Thank you for bringing me back down. Kent, what's an ellipsoid height?
Let me clarify. Let's approach it this way.
No, we're going to test you right here.
No,
I'm not saying not Kent specifically,
My
but
question is, as an actual surveyor, how much of what you know that goes into creating this certificate does the average surveyor, like Kent,
80%
need to know?
80%. You have to know. You have to be Well, I'm going to say, what's the pass fail? Let's say it's 80. Let's say it's 70. Some number like that.
Yeah.
So
But if you
70%.
handed that to the average surveyor,
Yeah, no, you got to get a 70 to pass the test.
what would they-
No, I,
whatever-
I
would they know?
understand that.
Yeah.
I understand that. But the knowledge that you have about this stuff far exceeds the average surveyor's knowledge.
And that makes me sad because
About
it shouldn't.
But
It
the
really
fact
shouldn't.
is, and I'm assuming you agree with me, that is the case. That is the case. Now, the number of surveyors that understand geodesy like you do is by far the minority of surveyors.
But I am a surveyor. I'm not a geodesist. And I
understand
do
that.
apply
I
this
understand
on
that.
my daily job because I have
Correct.
to. Because my daily job is a gravity system that's really super long.
right?
And those two things make it geodetic. Because
But
it's gravity
Again,
and it's super long.
you are part of the minority of surveyors that grasp
And I don't- and
the
I
concept
don't
like,
want
as
to be.
well as you do.
I'm just assuming that all surveyors know that if I go 15 miles, I've got to account for this curvature and how to do that.
Yeah, or convergence meridians or, any number of things. Yeah, it's like...
I am so excited to talk about Carlson Software. Founded in 1983, Carlson Software specializes in CAD design software, field data collection, and machine control products for the land surveying, civil engineering, construction, and mining industries worldwide, providing one-source technology solutions from data collection to design to construction.
Oh, yeah. Carlson Software's renowned dedication to customer service is unique in the industry. Their software suite is designed to complement land surveying operations and provides a variety of survey features to process data from surface modeling to least squares network adjustment. Users work seamlessly between the office and the field by utilizing company-wide design styles for ease of use and efficiency.
And I can say I have personally been using Carlson since 1991.
Whoa. 1991? How is that possible?
Oh my God. I don't know. I mean, time flies when you're having fun, that's for sure. But back in 1991, when I was introduced to Carlson, it was very apparent to me that their software products simply think like a surveyor. It's so easy to use. Their customer service is second to none. And I actually went to Maysville, Kentucky for some training and played golf with Bruce and his brother.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. Nicest human beings on the planet. Highly recommend Carlson.
To find out more, simply go to carlsonsw.com. Be sure to let them know the Geoholic sent you.
Let's come back to that one. So if I said I want to know the difference in height between point A and point B at some distance apart, would I want ellipsoid height if I'm flowing water?
Flowing water. I don't think it matters.
It absolutely does matter because it's a geometric height. It's not a geophysical height.
But it's
it's all right.
It's not a physical height though.
Well, it's physical in so much as I can measure it, I guess, but it's a geometric height.
Sure.
Now we get into geometric geodesy versus or physical geodesy.
Sure.
Physical geodesy is about its gravity field. Ellipsoid height is not a measure of that. Now, if I add a little simple model called a geoid, now I can start modeling it. And then in very simple terms, we'll call that orthometric height, or in very, very simple terms, elevation. Ellipsoid height is not elevation. It's not orthometric height. It's not what I want when I'm flowing water. I want orthometric height. Now, somebody's going to chime in on dynamic datums at the Great Lakes, and I just made an error, which I did, but I'm generalizing. I'm trying to keep it simple. So the measured ellipsoid height is not what I want as a client when I hire you to go out and put a bunch of panels out along the canal that I'm trying to flow water down. I want orthometric heights. More specifically, I want the national datum, the national vertical datum. And the national vertical datum is not based on ellipsoid height. It's based on orthometric height. Now, the modernized NSRS forthcoming will be a non-hybrid geoid model. It will be a gravimetric geoid model. What we've got right now is not a gravimetric geoid model. It's a little more complicated. I don't know. I'm going down a rabbit hole I shouldn't. So the point being is I don't want to measure ellipsoid. I do not want latitude, longitude, and ellipsoid height when I'm trying to do differences in height for my canal or my floodplain or et cetera. I want orthometric height.
Real quick though, before you get to there, what is the relationship between ellipsoid height and geoid height?
N, big N specifically. It's a geoid model. That's, it's like, big H equals a little h minus n. There's the number, or there's the math. So, it's just a very simple formula. So it's like, again, coming back to Sean's question, is like, what do I want to test a CGS, certified person in geodetic surveys? I want to test that they know they have to apply a geoid model. Now, I know it's going to be a little more complicated than that, especially in our current parlance. However, tomorrow, which is not tomorrow to the people listening to this podcast, well, maybe the people listening to the stream. How many are on there? 3? Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll just assume the vast majority of people listening to this are not going to be listening to it in the present. They're listening to it in the future. So in the past, go on the website, the NGS website, and there's going to be a panel discussion between 4 people. I'm not going to call them experts because I'm on the panel, but the others are experts.
3 experts and Brian.
Yeah, 3 experts and this guy. We're going to be talking about the benefits and the challenges on the modernized NSRS. And one of those things that at least I'm going to bring up is the fact that we are migrating to a gravimetric geoid in the definition of the new NSRS. Meaning, I go out and I do an OPA solution, and I get an ellipsoid height, and I add a geoid model. It'll be NAPGAD. I don't know if that's the official pronunciation, but NAPGD 22 vertical height based on a geoid model in the future that's a purely gravimetric geoid model. Voila, I just got elevation. That's the procedure. That's what I'm testing for. That's what I think we're testing for in a CGS. Caveat, I am on the board, but I do not speak for the board necessarily. But that's what we're trying to do. I want to make sure that I go out and I get a consultant that's going to understand he or she needs to use a geoid model when they're measuring ellipsoid height with their fancy-dancy technology that we all use and love. And they're properly reporting what I'm expecting them to report. That's the bottom line. And it can be that simple. And the education can be that simple. We're not geodesists, we're geodetic surveyors. Geodesists will go out there and they'll do gravity modeling and they'll do all sorts of error analysis and et cetera. And that's important. That's absolutely pivotal and absolutely foundational to us having models that actually mean something and can function for the work that we're doing. However, we as geodetic surveyors delivering data to our clients need to have a consistent and correct message. And that consistent and correct message is to utilize all of this technology and all of this mathematics correctly to result in an answer that is discrete and is the same thing. What is surveying? We measure stuff, it's relative to something, same answer twice.
I was going to say repeatable.
Repeatable, yeah. Or like we measure stuff. We're using GPS, we're using laser scanners, we're using inertial, we're using satellites, we're using photogrammetrics. That's all the measure stuff. That's all the equipment we're using. It's relative to something. Is it this room? I'm assuming the world is flat. It's cubic. It could be relative to this room. Does it have a lot of value? It does for this room, but it doesn't necessarily have value for this building, and it definitely doesn't have value for the city, nor this county, nor this state, nor this nation, nor in international commerce. I mean, look at all the other states. It's relative to the room. Hooray! It's not good for anything else. Mm-hmm. So, you want to know what's the value of geodesy? Global commerce, global pertinence. It's like, and everything in between. Yeah. It's everything outside this room is what geodesy is. And this room needs to have everything else. There's not enough beer in this room for us to sustain. We're going to run out, soon.
Eventually.
Yeah. It's like, okay, there's a clear, concise message. It's like, do you want to go to the store and get more beer? Yes. Geodesy. You need geodesy to do that. There's your answer.
Okay. So I got to dumb it down a little bit. How does what you just talked about relate to mapping projections?
Okay. Map projection is a specific mathematical mechanism to go from this round world, curvilinear coordinates, to use a fancy term, into flat Euclidean geometry again.
So Kent can work in it because
Kent and I can work in it.
Is a little above him.
I do round either. I don't. I like cubic geometry. So do engineers. That's Sean. Oh, yeah. So do architects. So do everybody else. Everybody likes cubic geometry. It makes sense. We want that. We need that. That is valuable. CAD works in cubic. I'd argue that most of the stuff that you're actually visualizing in, the geographic information systems is really being fed to you in a cubic sort of way. It's on your screen. Screen's flat, right? What's that done? What's that projection on the fly? You know, it's representing it in this one little square keyhole that you're looking through. I just way oversimplified that, but that's basically what's going on. You know, so it's like, we really want to just have our little local perspective. This other abstraction, which is reality, is beyond us. We want to, you know, keep things local. However, to have global pertinence, you need to have the reality in the background. The reality is the world's round. The reality is the gravity fields are not always constant. The reality is, you know, we move around. The tectonic plates move. The reality is when you pull a bunch of water or oil or gas out of the ground, it'll sink. The reality is that when the glaciers melt, the ground's going to rebound. It's isostatic rebound. I mean, you know, it's like that's reality. And reality is a real bummer. But it's still there, and you have to account for it when it accumulates into something that you can measure. And that gets into, you know, we measure stuff relative to. And same answer twice. So it's like if you don't apply these correctors that we know, they're systematic correctors that we as a society, we with super cool scientists can know and throw into a model for you. There's all these super cool scientists at NGS, National Geodetic Survey. They're full of like brilliant people. Why aren't you using the free stuff they're giving you? I don't know. It's free and it's high quality. It's global class.
Sounds complicated.
No, it's not complicated. N minus, or I'm sorry, big H equals little h minus n. I mean, that's it. It's just adding.
But aren't these, just based on everything you just said, aren't these measurements that we're taking really a snapshot in time?
Sure. Everything is. Everything's in a snapshot in time. Well, that was a concept I was kind of like floating around in my head. Like like that whole same answer twice. Well, really, we're just doing a probabilistic, certainty or uncertainty of where something is. And it's like, I was trying to think how to visualize that in my head. It's like a firework going off in a fog bank. You know, it's like there's a bright nucleus, but there's this cloud of uncertainty around it that's some distance. And then picture this fog bank has got a wind current that's blowing on it. So it's actually moving. And then as time goes by, that flash from the firework is going to fade. So eventually, not only is it not just like a pinprick of light, it's this zone of probability that's in motion that fades away. That is data. Like I go out and do a topo 20 years ago. Is it pertinent today? Probably not. It faded away. But if I do a topo 4 years ago, hey, that might still be pertinent. However, I'm going to have to factor in the motions that are going on, not only tectonically, but also locally. This is getting into the subsidence vectors, or tectonic motions and that type of thing, or dare I say, intra-frame tectonic motions, which are the deformities within, the simplified tectonic motions. The warping of the plate. The plate is like rotating, but it's also bending as it rotates. And this is all stuff that NGS does. They give it to us. They give us these models. This is in the background. We're already doing it. It's just a matter of like, is it got enough of a noise or an uncertainty in the modeling that it impacts how we measure things and we see it? And those noise, or our precision with our technology keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And what you end up doing is you measure more and more and more noise, or not a noise, systematic effect. What was noise in the past is now a systematic effect that you can cancel out in the present. And you need to apply it. Otherwise, it's going to screw up your measurements. And that's the brave new territory that we're going into. However, that's geodesy. That's not geodetic surveying. Geodetic surveying says use your geoid model. Use your HTTP model, horizontal time-dependent positioning model in the background. I don't have to understand plate tectonics. I'm not a scientist. But I can make sure HTTP is on in the background. And I do not want to apply it twice. Because if I apply it twice, a correction of a correction is an error. Does that make sense?
That's exactly what I was going to ask you, because if you do everything right, just like you're describing,
right,
but the next person comes along and doesn't do it the exact same way that you've done it, he's going to come up with a different solution.
That will not be same answer twice.
Correct.
And I will call that an error. I remember back in the day, this is something I saw. Somebody had, state plane. They're like, oh, bring state plane to ground. So they did. And then the client got his state plane to ground. They thought it was still a state plane. So they brought it to ground. This is ground.
So it got scaled twice.
Yeah. So, nominally, grid was below the surface of the earth by 800 feet, let's just say. And now they put the grid at the surface of the earth. And then when the client got it, they didn't know what they had. So they put it 800 feet in the air, and it's equally scaled the opposite direction. And it's, instead of being, surface measurements are 1.5 feet long in said mile, now they're 1.5 feet short instead of being 0, which is what they're trying to do. So they had grid, or they had ground. They over applied it. So it's, and you see that too. It's like, people are like, hey, we're not button pushers. You need to know the fundamentals. I hear this all the time in various discussions. I'm absolutely an advocate of learning this stuff, knowing how to do it. How do you know your data collector is giving you the right answer? If you didn't longhand it, or at least calculate it in a separate, independent way.
Ghost in the machine.
Ghost in the machine. Yeah, exactly. So get rid of those ghosts. I mean, should a CGS know how to longhand state plane coordinates? Should a CGS know how to longhand, I don't know, like calculating a geodesic or calculating, some sort of like deflection angle from the meridian, et cetera. It's like, all these, fancy geodetic stuff. Yes, I think they should learn it once at least and be able to demonstrate it on a test at the 70% level. So you don't have to be perfect. You got 4 of those questions, get 1 of them right. Type of thing. Or I don't know, you got 3 of them, get 1 of them right, and you pass. It's like you're not going to fail the whole test because you failed, 2/3 of your calculation things that were super hard. But they should be on the test because you should have been exposed to that at least once. Do I longhand calculate this stuff on a daily basis? Of course not. I use a computer. I'm not an idiot. It's efficient.
Right.
But
well, let me ask you this. I need to bring this back to my small brain, and what you're talking about is, and tell me if I'm off base here, but I like the analogy of, okay, in this room, okay, we're flat, but then as soon as we start to get outside, so and I think, and I'd like to hear your perspective on the accuracy of the tools that we're using to measure. So we always hear it, okay, well, this, whatever it is, that's plus or minus 1/10 or plus or minus 100th or whatever it is. So it seems like we're bouncing between how accurate we can measure what it should be versus how accurate the tools we are using deliver it. And are we getting so where what we're talking about, the differences are so small that that is smaller than the accuracy of the tool we're given? I mean, we're getting down to if there's a little, we're still physically measuring something. So if there's like a little pebble there, or all these different modes of error, don't they start to play in and start to compound more than if I'm talking about from here to Tempe? And
let's think about it. You're talking about random error.
One thing I want to add to that, I think it's a really good question. What's accurate enough?
Well, and is it relative to all the other tools that we're given?
Well, hang on, because I want to clue in on the accurate enough. It depends on what you're doing. How accurate do I have to get that wall from this wall in this room? Probably 1/4 inch. That's probably the accuracy. Yeah. So should I get out here with an Invar tape and do temperature corrections and do sag corrections and do, and try to have some sort of earth curvature correction and et cetera, and make sure that I'm exactly level and, I'm not sloping at all with my tape, all that.
Yeah.
And if I do that, is the site super going to get pissed off at me in an hour and a half when I have 3 walls laid out? And he expected me to have all 45 laid out? Yeah, he will. Yeah. And I'll get fired because that's stupid to go out and try to do all that stuff. I have 1/4 inch. I'm going to get my Stanley tape measure I bought at Home Depot that's in fractional inches, and I'm going to do the numbers in my head because there's 96 eighths in a foot, and there's 100 hundredths, and I'm going to whoop this thing out, and I'm going to go home. It's beer 30. We're done with the job because I did it right. I did it to the specification of what the job was.
Right.
But I didn't blow 5 feet in this suite, because that's the problem. The problem isn't, did I do it to the 100th or the 1,000th or 3,000th or, whatever. I remember one time I ran a bunch of levels with regular old 24 power, automatic level. There's nothing fancy. I forget. I don't even remember if it had a number. It was just some, Chicago steel and tape level. You go buy it for $200. It might even been, I don't think it was from Home Depot, but I'm not picking on Home Depot. I'm not trying to violate any sponsors, but some total consumer grade thing or just a leg up. and a fiberglass rod. You know the fiberglass rods I'm talking about. And you got that 5 foot segment, and you go click, 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 and there's like 500s because you see it. That I ran levels with that thing, and then somebody was busting my chops about it. And then I was like, okay, I have access to some other equipment. I'm going to have an Invar rod, and I'm going to have, an optical plate, tilt micrometer that I'm measuring directly. I'm actually observing to the 10th of a millimeter. That's the resolution of that thing. And I ran the levels, and I went out and did that. And this is, an old thing many years ago, and it was all optical, but still it was like, what my takeaway was? I still had random error.
Right.
I still had random error using that different equipment with a completely, the one was plus or minus 100th, maybe more every time I measured something. The other one's plus or minus 1/10 of a millimeter, which is, what is that? Not even 1,000th of a foot. But what I did, and then I didn't have closure on that. I still had stuff that didn't close, because I had circuit around the outside, and I ran 2 lines across the middle, and stuff didn't still add up. It still had a proportion error. It was just to several orders of magnitude smaller, but it was still random error. But what I totally saw in my other leveling circuit was how that random error went up and went down and went back up and went back down. And it was like this eye-opening moment, like the clouds part and the sun shone through, and I was illuminated with, the randomness of mathematics in the background. I'm like, aha, I see the random error that's inherent in that other system. And it was like, and I can see also, because of the closures on this new system, it's just several orders of magnitude different. Now, was it appropriate to apply that other piece of equipment out there? I had access to it, so sure, I'll say yes, it was. But should I go buy that kind of equipment to go out and do a job? Because my opinion on equipment, when you buy it, one, I hate debt. Do not go into debt to buy equipment. If there's a takeaway, don't go into debt. Now, I'll say that's on student loan, and we were talking earlier about student loans. I don't want to get political, but do not go into debt. If you cannot have your piece of equipment pay for itself in a certain period of time, which is brief, I'll call it like a year and a half. That's kind of, that's, you're making money. There's, like you go back to the private sector thing. It's like, you don't want to buy equipment, you're paying it off for 30 years. That's absurd. You're going to go out of business before you paid it off. Yeah. But it's like, you need to buy exactly the equipment to be able to meet the standards of that job. Going back to this room, 1/4 inch, 200ths, whatever, 3/4 of a centimeter. I don't care what unit you want to use. That's all you need to do in this room. Now, is that going to cut the mustard for like some thing where you're laying out a super collider? No, probably not. But that's a different job.
Right.
And that different job, I'm going to bid completely differently than wumping out a little corporate park like we're sitting in right here. That's going to be a completely different cost structure in that. So I don't know if that's helpful in the question that you had, but it's like, I think it's very important because surveyors, like engineers, is it engineering to build the most with the most? No, it's engineering to build the most with the least. We're not here to like use every piece of resource we have. We're here to eke out everything we can with the resource, the minimum resource that we have. You have a figure of merit that you're designing a job to, and you do not have any responsibility to go past 10% above that because that's your little safety factor. But 11%, that's a waste of money. 10%, that's required. It's like, so, it's like, I think people, like, oh, geodetic work, you're going to be all this, all about the exact figure. No, you have error in everything you do, just like the leveling story I told you about. There's error in both sets of levels. One of them has just a different order of magnitude. That's all. But it still was plus or minus a whole bunch of tenths of a millimeter, whereas the other one was a whole bunch of hundredths, because that was the magnitude of the measurement that I was doing. And so I'm not sure if I answered your question, but
I guess I was mainly curious if as the tools get better, does that inherently make it where you have to account for more error? You're talking about
there's more systematic effect you can see.
Bulging of plates.
Yeah, you go back 100 years ago. Plate tectonics is a theory, and it's not even a theory that people liked. They thought it was false because you couldn't measure it. You go back 100 years ago. You couldn't maybe it's 150 at this point. You could not do interconnection continent to continent. That wasn't existent yet in that era. And there's a little bit of argument on that. You go back, like what is that thing? You go to Greenwich and there's the Time Museum, And the guy that, they had all these like crazy pendulum clocks in front of the guy comes out with this little miniaturized thing and there's your chronometer. Well, in that era too, they had things they could like, I wrote this down, what is geodesy? It's a subset of astronomy and physics. And it was like, even in that era, because I think that's around the 1500s, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody will Google this after the fact and prove me wrong, but I don't care. It's like, they had the ability to observe the Jovian moons of Jupiter, which is, Callisto, Io, Ganymede, and Europa. They could see them. And they had very, very good knowledge of their orbital parameters and the timing that they had. You can go anywhere on this planet and observe the Jovian moons, except for like a couple months of the year when it's behind the sun. But nonetheless, it's like you can go around the planet. Even back in the 1500s, they had knowledge of this, and they could do time across the planet, and they could sync things up. I mean, so it was like that, because that was a huge problem. It's like, this longitude problem. On land, it was not a problem because you had little tricks like that. Talk about technology, that there's a technology that existed in the past, but you couldn't do it at sea. You couldn't do that effectively. And that's the whole thing with the chronometers. That, I'd built a little clock so you could do the longitude correctly at sea. But when you're out there floating around at 8 knots in a ship, I mean, it's like, we'll get there tomorrow. That's okay. It's still within the, still within the measurement tolerance of the job you're doing.
Right.
Measuring stuff relative to something, same answer twice. Their same answer might have been 4 nautical miles or even 20 nautical miles.
But you're still going to get there because you're going in the right direction. And you're not going
to run aground.
Yeah, right.
Because that's the, you don't, the name of the game is, I want to show up in port. I don't want to be at the bottom. I don't want to be dead. That's not good for business. Yep. And it's like, so in that era, you're going at that speed. That's just fine. But then you fast forward to today, why were we doing Earth gravity models? It's because we're shooting ballistic missiles at each other or conceptualizing the technology to be able to do it. That's your early things with the gravity. Because if a ballistic missile is flying in the gravity field, it's ballistic. It's not powered flight. Cruise missiles, different animal. But ballistic missiles are just this dumb thing lobbing through the air. The fuel is spent. So you have to know what the gravity field is because you're subject to it. So if we want to be able to ballistically send a missile from South Dakota to Moscow, as it were, we've got to have this knowledge of a world geodetic system that's got a world, EGM 80 or, whatever it was in that era, Earth gravitational model. You had to have those things for, what you were trying to do. What's the error ellipse on a nuclear missile? 20 miles? What's the error ellipse on artillery? Go back to...
You think it's like...
Doesn't it depend on...
Depends on the round, sure.
Yeah.
It's like, like back when I was in the Navy, I was in the Seabees, we had 81 millimeter mortars, 20 meter kill radius. If I get within 20 meters of my target, I blow it up because that's the shock wave that comes off that round. It's a little 10-pound round, if I remember right. 81 millimeters, that's how big around that damn thing is. It's huge. So if I'm a forward observer doing artillery calculations and I'm just sitting there, roughly distancing this thing and calculating everything in UTM, which is a hell of a lot more grid to ground problem than our state plane does for surveyors, it's like my error ellipse is 20 meters. If I get within 20 meters, I achieve my goal. It's like, so yeah, grid to ground doesn't matter in that instance. This error in measurement, I'm using like some little optical device, like I'm trying to remember some of the different little optical rangefinder things they had, and now the different techniques you had to do ranging. You're only trying to get within 20 meters, so it's like, but you fast forward to today, and I want to go out there with my laser scanner, and I want to do utility clearances, blah blah blah. It's like we're at a higher precision, but now because we're at this higher precision, there's all these other little effects that are going to come into it. Like I think about building information modeling or digital twins. That's the latest craze. Everybody wants to talk about digital twins. Well, it's like, go back to my firework analogy, in the fog, in the wind. It's like, how long is that digital twin pertinent without geodetic modeling? If it's not drifting with the plate tectonics, if it's not, deforming with the interframe velocities, if it's not syncing with the subsidence, all of that digital twin is going to come out of synchronization with reality in not terribly distant future. That's geodesy. That's geodetic surveying right there. It's like, did I put on my report when I measure the survey?
Snapshot in time.
Yeah, survey epoch coordinate.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like, reduced down to a reference epoch coordinate. Those are the buzzwords you're going to see coming out here in a couple of years. That's what they mean. Going back to the test questions, I want to test Kent, because we all know about Kent. I want to test him and make sure he knows to give me reference epoch coordinates, not survey epoch coordinates, because I don't want to screw that up. Because if that period of time is 10 years and the motion was 2 centimeters, that's 2 decimeters. That's 8 inches, more or less. I mean, I don't want to be off by 8 inches. In my digital twin, when I go out there with my little robot that's going to go poop a conduit in the right spot, which now is the wrong spot because I didn't factor my metadata correctly. There's what you're testing on a CGS.
And what's
Does
really,
that make sense?
What I just want to point out is we talked a lot about, you mentioned the underground.
The microphone stand?
Stupid microphone stand. The underground.
Talk about budgets.
Underground conduits and digital twins and having all that mapped and how so far we are behind that we don't have all of our underground infrastructure mapped. But what I'm now thinking of is, okay, that's great that Belgium has all their underground utilities mapped 10 years ago. If they try to use that 10 years from now, that is not going to be in the same spot, right? Like you're not going to have that same.
Here's an irony.
It's not the same. It's not going to be the same. It was where it was 20 years ago.
But if you have the metadata that was used at that point in time,
you can repeat it. Or do you correct it?
Here's another fundamental. I'm trying to think who always says this. I can picture his face. He's one of the guys at NGS. And he's talking about the error estimates within these models, and something he always comes back to. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. In a model, there's also an error estimate, and there's also uncertainty over time. So that's where I was like, the firework goes off, and it's drifting, and it's expanding, and it's fading. Eventually, your error estimates moving data into the future fades away for one reason or another. Either that error ellipse grew too big to meet the project parameters, or it faded away, it exceeded its shelf life, that was assigned in some capacity. Some of the stuff is brave new territory. I don't have an answer for you on how they're going to do this. I'm just like my weird mind that's that crazy techno music that I gave you. That's how I think about this stuff. I'm just like sitting there listening to crazy, music that's, really psychedelic, and you're teasing me about my really weird old Floyd stuff, and we did Floyd 2 episodes ago, but I mean, it's like, look at what those guys were doing and the expansion of their mind and thinking of variations of, mathematical principle, as it were. It was not accidental. They had a fractal on the cover of that album. I was going to tie that in somehow, but it's what I'm trying to describe is like, so eventually data is going to have a shelf life for one reason or another. And that shelf life is no longer going to apply. But then juxtapose that to our measurement capabilities. Because I used to think about this too, like, and Kent, I'm sure, because he's the same era that I am. We were out there brutally measuring individual points and doing line work. And, it's like if you got 50 points an hour, you were doing good. It's like on your topo. And then now look at scanners. 50 points an hour? Are you kidding me? It's 50 points a millisecond, or it's 500 points a millisecond. It's like, and now look at the ability we have to capture data. Or like your new employer, back when I worked there, whatever it was, almost 20 years ago, it's like we were doing a job down at Sky Harbor Airport, and we scanned it. And the reason we're scanning is because they're building some sort of big international walkway 70 feet in the air. How in the heck am I going to get up there and measure 70 feet in the air? Aha, laser scanners, remote sensing. And so it's like, here we come. We do all this work. We capture all this data. It is fresh. There is no shelf life because it's yesterday. And we designed, or the company did, and whoever our clients were, et cetera. I was just some lowly surveyor, and they're going, yep, GPS won't work under the roof. We're going to have to traverse in here with Total Station, because, I'm bringing practicality and levity into this job, because that's what we had to do. We had to traverse in there. It's like, because GPS won't work underneath, the Terminal 4 parking garage that's over the top of that terminal in there. But those things are, they're kind of working together. It's like, we might be losing a lot of historic data because it just doesn't have a shelf life in the future. But look at the way that we capture data in a modern sense. It's like going back to my day job, we did airborne LiDAR for the first time in 2015. And holy cow, is that a tough thing to justify and get to have management swallow and fund. And then in 2020, we did it again. And now they're like, we want it everywhere. How do we have it everywhere? This is great data. Holy cow, we've used it for this and this and this and this and this. It's wonderful data, but it has a shelf life because every flood event you have, it washes out. Now it's different. Every time somebody comes through and they build a new subdivision, well, now it's different. You've got to go out and capture new data. And so it's like, that's good news for the mapping guys because they're going to stay in business. But it's like, why am I worried about trying to go back and capture all this old data? And that's that, like you can get into a whole bunch of like interesting little things. Like how do you take an agency that is rooted or built originally in NAD 27, NGVD 29, legacy information, and how do you modernize them? Survey modernized within, I don't know, pretty damn soon after I got there in 2011. And in 2015, we were solidly a NAD 83, 1110, NAVD 88 shop. Unequivocally. All of our modern data was that. We fully modernized and surveyed. We were still delivering products to various people and whatever they wanted. Somebody wants NAD 27 and NGV 29, fine. I will model it backwards in a very rigorous, systematic way and give it to you as a product, but I'm not going to constrain my control networks to that data. It's garbage. I can't do it. It's geometrically unsound. I don't, you can use all sorts of, different descriptors of it. I cannot model backwards. If it's a small enough project, sure, that's getting into, like when is plane surveying, and when is it geodetic? Again, my opinion, it's all geodetic because it's like even the postage stamp of this room has to be stuck within a building, stuck within a city, stuck within a county, within a state, within a nation, on a planet that I'm measuring using truly geodetic tools like GPS because they fly around the whole planet. So it's like even modernizing. We internally are modernized, and we internally have a policy that says we go with whatever comes out because every project we do it with whatever's currently out there. When they went from Geoid 12 to 18 and January 1, 2018, I forget when they came out with it exactly, but I mean, it's like whenever they came out with it, we used it. That was the new thing we were using on that project. And the old data was something else, and we had to bring it forward. We could do it for a while. However, eventually, really, really, really old data that might have been done 30 years ago, it's almost easier to just go remeasure all of it than it is to try to like model it forward. At some point, like I was trying to say with the laser scanners and that kind of thing, you just go remeasure everything. It's efficient. Fly your drone, use your mobile scanner, whatever technology you've got, you're going to get new data. At some point, this legacy data, or actually almost anymore is like, I do something on the ditch. I've got one elevation that's NGVD 29. The rest of the job's NAVD 88. I do one little conversion on that piece of information, and it goes into my modern current job. And the engineers love it because it's not, it's like, what would you like? 4 data points or 4 million? Do you want every single thing that's actually what's out there today? Or do you want this thing off this drawing from 60 years ago almost? And every time they want the new data. All the new engineers that are coming in, all the new guys that are getting hired, they understand BIM. They understand Revit, and they understand, all these technologies. They know how to use CAD. They can do it in 3 dimensions. It's like they understand that stuff. They want it. Like we have machine control on most of our maintenance crews now. Not all of them. Some of them holdouts. They want to go out there and blade it by eye, and they do a good job. But that skill set is retiring, literally. And the newer guys want to come in with machine control, which means a model, which means it's tied to control, which means they've got to have a base, and they got to put it on something. And guess what? It's our control. And we only do our control in NAD 83, 1110.
Yeah.
And then, anyway.
I mean, it's got to be constrained one way.
Well, got to be relative to. Right. Going back to that 3 things.
Yeah.
Measure stuff, relative to, same answer twice.
I love the folks at Bad Elf. Bad Elf GNS receivers deliver affordable accuracy through easy-to-use hardware supported by continuously evolving firmware, apps, and cloud services. Founded in 2010, Bad Elf created the first made-for-iOS external GPS accessory and now enables high-performance location services for all mobile platforms.
Man, that's amazing. Did you also know that all of your new GNSS receivers can be accurate, affordable, and flexible? The Bad Elf Flex offers a trailblazing survey-grade receiver that delivers consistent accuracy at a highly affordable price.
I'm going to stress affordable price.
Yeah.
You got to check it out. Many people think companies go into business to create products and services, but at Bad Elf, they strive to create loyal customers. To find out more, simply go to badelf.com and let them know that Geoholics sent you for the baddest discounts available. Let's talk about, just real quick, the things we're talking about are pretty complex. I mean, maybe for you it's not complex, but for most people it's complex mathematics. Now, a number of surveyors make a living out of just doing lot surveys, working out of their house, right? Do they need to be concerned about these things that we're talking about? Depends
on the client.
Okay.
I mean, it's like if I'm just doing lot surveys out of my house, who's my client? Do they have to record to the county? Does the county have a requirement? Or the city? If the city says it has to be on this system, I guess you do. You know, like I was talking to Steve McLean down in Tucson. Yep. And he's like, hey, you know, I've got, you know, whatever equipment I got, can't even log data anymore, but it does RTK. And I can do lots of bets I want all day long. And he's not wrong. And I can remember having this conversation 20 years ago, and people are like, I don't want to buy GPS equipment. Hey, while you're up, I know you just said, I don't want to buy GPS equipment. I'm like, did you buy a photogrammetry plane? No. But do you offer photogrammetry to clients? Mm-hmm. Yes. How do you do it? If you don't own your own photogrammetry plane, but the suppressive requirement to have ortho photos on your project. Oh, well, we contract it. I was like, why don't you contract your GPS work? Yeah. I actually did that for a while when I was back running my own company. Thank you so much. Thank you for the beer, for those of you who can't see. Just contract it. You know, it's like or from a city managerial standpoint, have enough passive control out there that you support all levels of access to your spatial reference system. And I would say the same thing back to NGS. And I will tomorrow when we're talking about that. That's one of my major talking points, is a benefit of NSRS modernization. National Spatial Reference System modernization is a simplified and streamlined and improved access to putting data into their system, blue booking, as it were.
Blue booking.
So from an NGS managerial standpoint of defining the NSRS, defining the National Spatial Reference System, they're only going to do it with Coors because there's 170 people more or less at that agency, and they can't go survey the country. Not with 170 people, but they can manage, reference stations. And then that's the defining capacity of the system. Then we, the people, the constituents, can come in and do our passive control work. We can go out and do our static surveys using core stations that we may be contributors and operators and participants in the active system, the core system. Mm-hmm. And then on the passive side, because we need it, because there's still going to be, that mom and pop shop, as it were, that wants to only run a total station, and they need the 2 points or, whatever. I don't know. I'm not going to get into subtlety of like, how many points do you need in the PLSS? Let's call it 5. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it's 5, for a quarter, excluding center of section. So you need a multiple number of points. So this mom and pop survey shop can go out and tie stuff that has geodetically pertinent values on it in a passive sense, and they can still be in state plane, as it were, with their total station. You don't need GPS to be in a geodetic environment. Actually, I did that at a central chapter thing. I did a presentation on that. I was running a job with a total station in grid using my total station, and I just showed the math because it's a setting in most of our software. Yeah. I mean, that one was the yellow kind or the Trimble kind, but almost all of these things have that. I mean, it's just like they're reducing every single surface measurement to the grid. Oh, that was one of your questions. Can you explain the difference between grid and ground in the context of surveying and mapping?
Well, where I want to go with that,
sure,
more specifically, is there's a lot of surveyors out there that, hop out of their truck, flip on their GPS, log onto a VRS system,
sure,
survey all day long, bring it back into the office, apply a scale factor that a lot of times the ghost in the machine has derived.
Could be.
And they go about their day. Are they doing it wrong?
Right and wrong is only...
Well, it's a relative term, right?
Is a definition of regulation.
Yeah.
If there's no regulation that says how you do it, then there's no wrong.
Sure.
But if the client said, I want state plane, and they scaled it to ground,
yeah,
just like I said previously, because I saw that in a municipality. It actually was Chandler back in the day. And the city of Chandler said, we want state plane ground. And the client the surveyor did that. They did a GPS survey, and everything was at grid, and then they threw it in Excel and multiplied by 1.0001513276983, you know, God knows how many, and gave them the numbers. But they still looked like state plane because they were big numbers. And so they scaled it to ground with another scale factor. Now you got ground. And now you're long instead of short.
Yep. But
you're not unity. And then actually my little snarky comment was like, you know, what's the difference between grid and ground? You guys see The Matrix? Mm-hmm. Neo's in there. Yeah. He's like the little bald kid with the lady with the cookies. I didn't fully understand that scene. But anyway, the kid's on the floor with the spoon, and he's bending the spoon with his mind. You remember that scene? Yeah. And he says you remember what he said to Neo? To bend the spoon, first you have to realize there's no spoon. There is no ground. This is an abstraction. This is an assumption the world is a cube, and it's not.
But we base all our surveys on ground.
But they're not. There is no ground. If you go up, like what's the radius of the Earth? More or less. 21 million feet. If you go up 21 feet, you're a part per million different curve, different radius than you were at the lower elevation. You got a job that's got, 200 feet of relief. That's 10 parts per million of curvature distortion in your job. Is 10 parts per million significant is the next major question. And if I'm laying out these walls and they got to be plus or minus a quarter inch and 12 feet, no. The answer is no. It doesn't matter. I can't measure it. Not with my Stanley tape from Home Depot that I bought this morning because I forgot my AM tape again. And they told me if I forget my equipment, I'm fired. Doggone it, I'm going to go buy another one. And I'm going to lay out the job. It's not a decimal foot tape, but it's a tape nonetheless, and I get the job done. How many times have you been there, Kent? I've been there more than once. Yeah. Where I had to do something to make it happen. And I was, the professional way of saying that is like I went out there and I properly assessed the accuracy requirements of the job, and I professionally made a decision that was, within accordance of the compliance of the contract. And I can still bill, which is correct. But I made a decision on what I was able to do. Like, in 10 parts per million it's not even the thickness of the damn line that's printed on the tape. Right. You can't measure it. It's 500ths in a mile. A mile. How big is this building? 500 feet? Well, that's the width of the lot, maybe. Actually, it's probably not even that big a lot. It's like 300 feet. Yeah. The building itself is 200. You can't measure that kind of distortion in that distance. It doesn't matter in a localized sense. It does matter when I'm computing coordinates from a 0, 0 and a Cartesian coordinate sense. That's down in the Gulf of Mexico. Gulf of California. It's off of Rocky Point. That's where our 0, 0 is in this state plane zone we're sitting in. Hundreds of miles away. Actually, the important thing is it's a million feet away. And so 10 parts in a million is 10 feet. So my northing is an error by 10 feet if I don't do it correctly. Yeah. In one way to look at it. If I start scaling things around and that kind of stuff. And what's your typical grid to ground here in the valley? It's 150 parts per million. Where we're sitting. So more or less the grid to ground scale factor that I would compute right where we're sitting here is 150 feet. That's not even this lot anymore. That's that lot over there. That's a problem. I've seen that happen. I saw a PetSmart get built like that. It got built on the wrong lot at one of those, strip mall things. Yep. And they were lucky because they switched with Bed Bath & Beyond or whatever it was. and they got to swap the lots. Because otherwise Bed Bath & Beyond would have been the proud new owners of a PetSmart because that's cadastral law. You can come in and build whatever the hell you want on my lot, and I own it when you're done. Yeah. But those guys were cool, and they got along because somebody built the thing on the wrong lot. I think that might not have been a grid to ground problem, but it could have been. That's the kind of thing, it's like if I'm 150 feet off, I'm the other side of that wall over there, which is the lot line. Yeah.
At those coordinates, when you're talking about those millions.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Okay. And if you're in Flagstaff, it's worse because that's 2 million. Yeah. You're in Tucson, it's not so bad, but you're probably still not in the right spot. Right. You didn't meet your setback. Yeah. It's like, you get into a practical sense. It's like if I put the coordinates into my collector, they're like, what's the big thing about, people ridiculing surveys? You're just button pushers. Well, if we're analyzing this stuff, we know these fundamentals. That's my point. My point is you need to know these fundamentals at least once on a test so you can go out and check it the first time and then knock yourself out. Go out and do production and make some money. But you better know what you're doing the first time you did it. You better know how to do the check.
In the example you gave, I got there, I got out of my truck, boom, boom, boom. get back to the office, pull it in, apply the factor, and I'm done. But there's no check. There's no, okay, is this actually, can I get to the same answer one other way to make sure I'm on the right lot?
I wrote a whole article on that in American Surveyor. It was like getting off on the wrong foot, I think is the title of the article. And it was like, it was just tragedy after tragedy after tragedy on the stupid building. And in the article I said, I can't tell you where it is. It's downtown Phoenix. So they approached the Sky Harbor Airport. That's where the thing is. There's enough breadcrumbs in the article. You can figure it out if you're smart. But, it's like, that's what it was. And it was like, it was a 20-story building and they lost a floor. Well, that's 5%. Huh. What's the profit on a project like that? The last 10%. What does that actually mean? It means bankruptcy. That's what that means. You lost your profit. Wow. You lost half of your profit. Half the reason you were there is now gone. Yeah. Because somebody put it a couple of feet over because of, a whole, well, that was a scale. It was still a scale thing because it was a wrong foot, 2 parts per million off instead of 150, but still nonetheless, it's like, you need to know your geodesy. You need to know when the corrector applies and when it doesn't apply. It's important. Yeah. It has real world consequences, and maybe in my career, I've seen more of them because I can pay attention, but you asked me earlier, what got me into this? The terror of doing it wrong, Well, I remember I ran into a gentleman because there's a control station here in the valley. It's called N474. It's a first order vertical, and it's also an FBN point, et cetera. And Leroy Palmer, he's now deceased, but he was a neat guy that lived right next to that point. And he had this huge house with an observatory up on the top of it. And he sees me out there, I've got my grubby hat, my dirty boots and all that. And he comes out and he starts talking to me a little bit about astronomy and this and that. And I start blah, 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 like I do. And he's like, you are a neat guy. Come here. I want to show you something. And he hauls me up to the top of his house and he shows me his telescope up at, that he's got up there. We were doing, various oculations and, different, observations. And I was like, Leroy, what got you into astronomy? He was like, fear of death. I'm like, I'll bite. What does that mean? He's like, well, I was I think it was B-52 bomber navigator. This is Cold War stuff that's going on. And he's flying up over the Arctic Circle and doing navigations. And if you screw up your navigations over the Arctic Circle, what happens? You crash and die. Fear of death. It's like, is geodesy important? Is astronomy important? Is navigation important? Yes, it is. There's definitely some things where it's like make or break. Neat guy. And it was like, and I put a position up on, one of the stanchions on his telescope because he
probably loved it.
Yeah, no, he bought us lunch and he was a totally cool dude. He passed away a number of years ago, pancreatic cancer, but still, it was just like, what a neat story. It's like, what a neat little piece of history. Yeah. It's like, is geodesy important? Yeah, absolutely. It has an absolute value that you need to have. It's like, is geometry important? Is algebra important? Is calculus important? You can go on and on. Yeah, all of them are important. It's like in their own right. Do I do calculus on a daily basis? No, but those principles are embedded in my brain and I can't help it. Mm-hmm. And I make better decisions because of it. Yeah. And you're coming back to like, how do I budget? Well, the way I was originally budgeting was I was sitting there visualizing this curve of decay of equipment and trying to figure out a realistic life cycle because I know the longer I go, the more probable it is that it's going to fail. That's calculus. That's me doing calculus in my head. That's a fundamental of calculus in my head. This notion that it's not a straight line. Mm-hmm. If I go double the time, it's half the value. No, if I go double the time, it's a quarter the value. It's this nonlinear functionality that's going on. So do I do a calculus on a daily basis? Hell no. I can't even differentiate or integrate or any of that anymore. That was 20 plus years ago, but the principles are embedded in my psyche and I'm making better decisions because of it. Same thing, CGS. Why do I want to have a CGS? Because I want to imprint on your psyche as a surveyor, as a geodetic surveyor, a geodetically minded surveyor doing good work for our society. I don't want to get all patriotic and JFK is not what you can do for your country, but or not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. You want to improve our society, you learn geodesy and you'll do better work and we'll have better societies because of it. Because these technologies that we have, like digital twins and like the point clouds and all that, how do we make that have more value? How do we as a survey industry not get completely eclipsed by, geospatial side of the table? We bring something to it. We bring a value to it. If we have no value, we will cease to exist.
It's your civic duty to understand
Absolutely.
geoids.
That's why I joined the Navy when I was 17.
But it's also, I mean,
that's why I do jury duty now and again.
I think one of the most important things you mentioned also is that you have to be aware or know when to apply these concepts and when not to, right?
Yeah. You have to
I
understand.
mean, it's huge.
Like,
I think that's a huge takeaway.
and it's not that complicated
Yeah.
because it's like, I think everybody should do a state plan coordinate calculation longhand once.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, I agree
Including
with all
you.
that. Yeah.
Including you. Absolutely. Because it's like you do it longhand once, you do a transverse Mercator with all the terms and
Yeah.
and you write it out in Word like I did back when I was teaching that geodesy class at Phoenix College. It's like 18 pages. It's absurd, but it's doable. It's not that hard. You know, like I did it. Look at me. Nothing special. There was a whole bunch of
90 minutes will
You're special,
disagree
Brian.
with you.
You are special.
That special.
There were a lot of people in the class that because I said, I want you to see this. It's to see, you know, it's a 150 level class. I'm not going to bust your chops. You know, like if you try it, you know, if you don't do it, you're not going to fail.
Yeah.
That was my opinion back in that day. It's the same basic opinion today, but I was like, if you do it, you're going to be a better person for it. And I worked my ass off to prepare the document for you to study it. And it's like, you know, part of this is like, you're coming to this class, take away as much as you can. And it's like, if you can take away doing this calculation once, you know, you did it. Cause like, then I went through and I programmed it into Excel. I've programmed it, a couple of different, or Google Sheets. I've done it in there too. It's like, I figured out how to program ECEF into Google Sheets one time. It was like, that's a whole story. My youngest daughter was in the hospital when she was a month old, and I was working at DEA. So, and I'm over there at 24th Street in Camelback. She's down at Phoenix Children's. She's 31 days old. There's a whole insurance thing about that too. It's like, oh, your insurance expired at 30 days because you didn't notify. So I was like, I was in the damn company newsletter. What do you mean I don't have insurance? It's like, and they finally fixed it. But anyway, so I'm spending the night every night down at Phoenix Children's Hospital for like, I don't know, 14 days, 16 days, something like that. And then I was going to work, so I'm not going very far away. I'm going up and I'm going to work all day. And then at night I was going down. I had the night shift, hardly slept at all. And I did ECF on my laptop while I'm sitting there next to my beautiful young daughter that I had to have hardly any interaction with. She's just sitting there sleeping, it's like, but it was like, I just had this opportunity, this weird period in my life. And I programmed ECF into my computer, it was like, and now I can do ECF longhand, and then that's the kind of thing I want to share. Because that's why I want to go to NSPS CST. And it's like, okay, that's not CST level 1. I'll give you that. That's not level 2. I'll give you that. It's probably not bad for level 3 to do that. And that whole level 4 thing, yeah, absolutely. And then level 5, which is, CGS as it were. Yeah, absolutely. I think that should be on the test. I think you should do longhand, one of them, oblique Mercator, transverse Mercator, Limburg conic, whatever. You should do one of those. You should be able to do one of those. I mean, it's a rite of passage.
Rite of passage.
I mean,
right.
come on.
I like it.
But is it required on a daily basis? Absolutely not. But what is it? I don't know. We can get off on the whole, what's the point of a test or a degree or any of that type of thing? It's a rite of passage.
Time's flying by here. We've hardly scratched the surface, some of the things we wanted to get to. But before we let you get out of here, I do want to get an update from you on the modernization project that you're working on.
Which one?
As it pertains to the new state plane coordinates that are going to be, it was 2022. What is it now?
Mid 2025 is the latest official thing.
Yep.
That's what they're saying. Mid, meaning,
June.
Summer solstice. What's today?
Oh,
Sean?
interesting.
Ooh, is it today?
Yes.
So if this were 2025, we would have
Interesting.
everything. No, I'm teasing.
I don't even know if it was either today or yesterday.
Today, I believe. Yeah.
It's actually like a specific instant in time.
Yeah, there's
it's
a
when
time.
the Earth is at its perigee in the orbit, I think is what it is. So it's a different time every year.
If it's during the show, we're
I
gonna
have
have
a
to do
book on that. I could have brought that.
we're gonna have to do a shot or something. When is it, Sean?
I got to drive home, Kate. Come on.
It was at 7:57 a.m. this morning.
Oh, really?
So is that UT time or Arizona time?
Arizona time.
Okay, there you go. Because it's a specific
Cool.
time and it drifts every year. Yeah, look up Anna Liam.
And
if
it
you wanna
goes
blow your
between
mind.
2 or 3 days, or I think it's like between the 20th and the 22nd.
It's on a 5-day cycle or a 5-year cycle 4-year cycle because there's your leap years. Yeah, you can do a whole thing on Gregorian calendars and all that, and every 400 years this, and blah blah blah, and you get leap seconds, and then whatever. Time's a fun one.
It is.
So what's going
And,
on?
and if you get out to the James Webb Space Telescope that we were talking about before, that's so far away from this gravity field, time is faster
Yes.
than it is here. And they're at a Lagrange point. I was like, you guys like muted my mic earlier. Lame, because you had to make your money. And I was like holding up my sign. I was like, they put me on mute. But I was like, I was in the background going like, oh, it's a Lagrange point, which is like a gravity well. That I don't know. I digress. That's astronomy stuff.
But so what is the update though that you can provide us?
Mid-2025. And they will not have all the tools, and they'll have most of the products, because the whole thing was holding on. There's a project called GravD, which is gravity for the redefinition of the vertical datum. I'm butchering what the acronym stands for, but you can Google it. It's on their website. And it was aerial gravity in conjunction. So they have an airplane with a gravimeter that they fly over everywhere and do gravity measurements. And they have an absolute gravimeter and a relative gravimeter in ground campaigns they do on the surface of the Earth. And they've got space-based gravity, which is like your GRACE satellites. And again, not a geodesist here. I just read a couple of things, and you guys can too. Come on, you can read. I know you can. Please do it. So anyway, it's like there's these 3 different ways they're doing gravity, and then that got into the whole question of like, do we want ellipsoid height or do we want something else, which is like this whole notion of sea level and Gauss, and it's the same number everywhere. So that, the gravity field is now measured, and we know what it is because we measured it. It's not approximated, but we know what it is because we actually measured it. So why do we have better data? Because we had better and more measurements. That's all that it is.
Interesting.
It's a technology thing. So that project got delayed because of COVID, something else. There was a Great Lake thing, and I don't know, some Canadian thing. I know Arizona had a weird thing because like there's this huge part of us that's a bomber range, the Barry Goldwater gunnery range. They didn't fly. I don't know. They had to get military clearance because you can't fly over that. The military tends to frown on flying over that. And
yeah.
They either think you're a drug runner or a terrorist, and either way, they shoot you down.
Yeah.
So, but Arizona got done. I think it was before 2018 because the Geode 18.
Well, yeah. No, I remember being a part of those conversations with you.
Yeah. Well, Geode 18 has GravD data embedded within it. So our Geode 18 is a wicked cool geoid. It's very correct, sort of, because there's a whole subset of like, what do they call it? Artifacts within the NAVD88 passive mark constraints that, it's actually warped, but, the sciencey stuff behind it was a lot better. So it had a lot more quality to it. And it is a better model for various reasons, but that was the big driver behind the red button being pressed to get to the new datum, plus tools. They're also developing a lot of tools like NatRef, which is I'm trying to remember what that acronym stands for. It's the coordinate transformation tool. Not NetRef, NCAT. That's what it is. It's the NGS coordinate something transformation. I forget what the acronym stands for, but NCAT, which is like, if you guys remember VertCon and NADCon and all those software tools that were out there. That's what, that's the whole coordinate conversion stuff, going from one realization to another, going from 27 to 83, et cetera, that type of stuff. Modeling. So, again, I'm going to go back to that. It's a firework in the fog and the wind. If I've got old firework data and I'm going to take a measurement today, how do I put those two together? Because I know there's a variation. I'm going to do it with models. You go back to, the question again, what's the average surveyor need to know? Use the model. What's the average surveyor need to know? Use the geoid. What's the average surveyor need to know? You can't constrain old stuff. You can only constrain current stuff. I mean, these are the fundamentals. What antenna height do you measure? ARP. What does ARP mean? That's trivia in term reference point. Anyway, but it's like, that's what the geodetic surveyor needs to know. Do you need to know how to model an antenna? No, that's science. There's a line in there somewhere. I know there is. And some of it's science and some of it's what we got to know. And it's the same stuff like we've already done. Where do you measure to the prism? To the middle. It's like, how do you, do you do it at an angle with parallax, or do you stand straight on? I mean, we already have all these fundamentals. We already know what we're doing. We are very professional people. We just have a couple of new things to learn and test for. That's it.
That's it, Sean.
That's it.
It's easy.
It's just
easy
that
peasy.
easy.
Sean, I can see you getting this certificate.
Oh, yeah. This is right up my alley.
Hell no, he's an engineer.
Yeah.
What are you, PE? I mean, it's
Yeah.
PE civil?
Yeah.
Oh, you're close. Maybe
Close
we'll
enough.
give it to you.
My bachelor's in mechanical, so I got a little more.
I had a good buddy that was mechanical.
More calculus than the typical civil, so it helps.
There's a good buddy of mine, Jesse Boyd. Shout out, hey Jess. And we have to go to Vittles. He knows what that means, and have lunch. But anyway, I got to call him. But I was surveying his mom and dad's house, and like he just happened to be up there. They lived up in New River, and he comes out and he's studying mechanical. I think it was mechanical engineering. Pretty sure at U of A. And he comes out and he talks to this wacky dude that's out there surveying the property. And it turned him on to surveying. He's like, holy cow, I have to know what you know. That's just bizarre. And he ended up he was like my roommate for a while. And then he worked at the same company as I owned. And we've been friends for a long, long time. But yeah, it was like, there's hope for you. It's the moral of the story.
It's still possible.
There is hope. I've seen it happen with my own eyes. So yeah.
Kent, what else do you have?
I'm good, man. I mean, there's so much more we get to. We'll have Brian Fisher round 3.
Yeah. My
I'd love
mind's swimming a little bit, so I do have to ask the last question.
This one?
Do you have a mantra that you live by?
I told you the guys last time. It's that, like that comes out of, my military. Shoot to hit, fight to win, adapt and overcome. Failure is not an option. A lot of that's is stole from the Marines, but I was a Seabeam.
I like it.
And that's, we hung around on a lot of
And you
bases.
still live by that now?
No, I don't. I've not dumbed it down. I civilianized it. Aim to succeed, or not fight to win, but it's like take on challenges to be successful. Adapt and overcome. That one still applies. And failure is not an option. It's like don't give up. It's like the only time failure is permanent is when you stop trying. So
I like that.
I still like that.
That's a good one.
I'm gonna make note of that one right here. All right, what else? Are we good? Anything else? What do you got,
there's
Sean?
another one. Is like any parting words? Is that one you're gonna ask me?
Yeah.
I like that one.
Do you have any parting words?
I do, Sean. Thanks for asking. Never.
What have you not
we-
touched on?
We have lost the show, Sean. We have lost the show. It is now Brian's world. We just live in it.
Never miss your kid's field trip.
Ooh, okay.
Why is that? Is that from experience?
Okay, that come back to the whole work-life balance thing. See how I tied that in?
Yeah.
This is literacy or literature at its finest. We've tied it all together. It's like, have work-life balance. Don't take this stuff too seriously. I mean, you got to work hard, but don't miss the important things. Don't miss your kid's field trip. That's the important stuff.
Because that's what they'll remember.
Oh yeah, hell yeah. I mean, now on the grandkids you can let it slide because like their parents should be going, but if their parents aren't going, fair game. Go to the kids' field trip. I've gone to a ton, and that goes back to that work-life balance. I would rather have experiences and memories than things and accomplishments, and I would rather have touched one person's life in a meaningful way than had mindless dribbled of millions. And I'm sure there's a Bible quote in there. It's like better to have. It's not as good to gain the whole world and lost your salvation. And I'm butchering. That's Paul, Apostle Paul, that did that one. But it's like, don't lose point of the real purpose in life. And the real purpose in life is our relationships. Here's a shameless plug. I just wrote an article on American Surveyor on my takeaways from the FIG conference that I just got a chance to go to, which was amazing, and we could talk about that for a long time, but I won't. I'll just cut to the chase. There is the big M in NSRS modernization, all the glitzy stuff, the technology and the new datum and the tools, that's the big M. But there's a little m, and that's all the people that are making it happen. And I stole that quote from one of the NGS presenters. Read the article and you'll see some of the other things. But it was like, it's all the people. It's the relationships. That's the big takeaway. And that correlates to this thing I just said. Never miss your kid's field trip. Because don't lose sight of what's actually important. And it probably doesn't start with a capital letter. It's something you don't think is obvious. And it really is the biggest thing. So I probably should shut up after that.
I like that.
That's a good leave there, Brian. Again, our guest is smarter than you and I combined. What is happening here?
I'm more average than your smartest.
And we're
bear.
trending in the wrong direction.
We are trending in the wrong direction, exactly. All right. I believe that's about all we got. Brian, thanks again for being here. This has
Thank
been
you for
great.
having me. This is awesome. I mean, you guys are awesome. I'm so appreciative that you are out there doing something for our society. I like how you're closing me out on something that isn't ABBA.
Right.
Dancing Queen.
Yeah. Try to talk over this one. I got to hear it.
Oh, man. All right. Well, hey, thanks. I failed to thank you earlier. Thanks for your service. Appreciate that.
yes, absolutely.
It's my privilege and pleasure.
Adding value and making friends. Once again, if anyone would like to be a guest on a future show, shoot us an email at info@thegeoholics.com. What did we decide to call this? Aphex Twin. What is this? Bucephalus Bouncing Ball?
Close enough.
Something like that. Available everywhere, I
Pie
think.
movie soundtrack.
It should be
Pie movie
everywhere.
soundtrack,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Go watch the movie.
I have to watch the movie. Until next time, have the fear of doing it wrong. I love that. Don't stop trying. Don't miss the important things. Most importantly, be safe and healthy.
Field trips. Go on field trips.
My name's Evelyn, and I'm with you. Goodbye.